Welcome to Danny on Everything. I'm your host, Danny Bedrosian, coming to you live, well, not live, but coming to you from Osaka, Japan, one of my favorite cities in the whole wide world, man. I am joined from afar by my producer, Carl Cerny, over at Moose Magnificat, who we thank so much for all of his continued hard work and effort. Remember, you can support me by going to my Patreon. That's patreon.com/Danny Bedrosian, where you can support all my music, books, and comics. Also, you can check out George Clinton's Patreon, which I help run as well, and another show that we have here on YouTube called A Bump by Bump Rundown. That's hosted by George and myself. I highly recommend you check that out if you like what I'm doing here. I have the book, The Authorized P-Funk Song Reference, which is out. You can get it everywhere books are sold. You can also pick up my comic book, Sons of the Sun, where you can get it directly from me if you just inbox me at Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, I'm at Danny Bedrosian. Same thing with Facebook. And you can check out my music. We've got a few albums still in stock by Moonchild and Lesson. And we are working on a new album that's coming out in about a month, and it's kind of a secret, so it's going to be coming to you guys pretty soon. But here in Japan with George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic, playing in Osaka today, playing Nagoya day after tomorrow, and then Tokyo in about 4 days. So really excited to be back. First time since last year, so happy to be back so soon. Like I said, one of my favorite cities, just a gorgeous, beautiful city and a great shot from my room. I feel like I have the same room every time I'm here because it's always the exact same view. And it's just so beautiful. I already went to one of my favorite spots, the Han Shin, which is like, it's almost like if you took an entire food court and put it in like a Macy's. That's kind of what the Han Shin is, except it's in the subway. So you go into the underground, and then you go make your way to the Hanshin, and it's just food, tea, candy, chocolates, wine, groceries, hot food, cold food, every kind of food you've never heard of. I highly recommend if you come to Japan, if you come to Osaka, go to the Hanshin and try things you haven't had. It's very good to open up your mind, open up your palate to new things and new ideas. So, also sending a bunch of love to my K-fam, my kayfabe family of artists and creators. The last time I was here, not in Osaka specifically, but the last time I was in Japan, I was hanging out with our boy Ed Piskor. May he rest in peace and rest in power, rest in love, and never be forgotten. And so coming back this time, he's heavy on my mind. And my K-fam is heavy on my mind. So I'm thinking about you guys, thinking about Ed, and just really excited to be back. We had our Secret Army show in Concord, New Hampshire, just the day before we left at the BNH stage, the Bank of New Hampshire stage in Concord. And it was just amazing. I was super happy to make it back over there for that show. Myself, Lige Curry, Benzel Cowan, Greg Keller, Nick Pelkey. And we saw so many old friends from my old band, friends from college, friends from high school, friends from my old hometown, family, friends from the K-Fam. All kinds of great folks came out and supported, and it meant the world to me. I stupidly did not record the show, which I'm very angry about, but I'm hoping maybe they got a board recording, so I'm kind of looking into that now, and hopefully we'll have something from that. But we do have some exciting Secret Army live stuff coming up for our podcast family here, Danny on Everything. There will be an upcoming release that Carl and myself are putting together in that regard, and I don't want to give too much away, but it's going to be really special. In addition to that, we have a great show this month. I want you to stay tuned, check out what we have going on. It's going to be most excellent. And am I leaving anything else out? Oh, well, we got some shows coming up that I can let you guys know about. I think that'd be a pretty good idea. On September the 27th, George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic at SCAD, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. Very special show as well as art exhibit there. On the 28th, the next day, we are having the Funketeers Ball with Mr. Garrett Scheider leading the festivities, and also featuring Mike Hampton, Benzel Cowan, Greg Boyer, Greg Thomas, Benny Cowan, myself, Lige Curry, did I mention Lige? Who else? Somebody else. And we're doing a bunch of great P-Funk stuff. Funketeers Ball is kind of like the P-Funk convention, if you will. And it's held, is it Bethesda? Forgive me if it's not. It's somewhere up in the DMV area between DC and Baltimore. But that's coming up on the 28th of September. And then we have P-Funk. We have October 11th in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and October 18th in Miami, Florida. Additionally, in December, Secret Army is coming back to New England. I believe the dates are going to be December 12th in Portland, Maine, December 13th in Boston, Mass., and December 14th in Searsport, Maine. So those are going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that stuff. And there's going to be a whole lot more shows coming up, not just for the rest of the year, but also in 2025. We have some Secret Army tours planned for February, April, possibly May, and August. So we are working on some more stuff for 2025 that I'm really excited about. We're going to have a lot more content coming to you for Danny on Everything in the year ahead. Really excited about that. Kind of got some stuff in the works in that regard that we're talking about right now. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. As always, busy, keeping busy, trying to keep it together. It was like a 12-hour flight getting here, and it's 13 hours ahead of the East Coast in America. So right now, you know, it's very much nighttime at home, and it is very much daytime here, as you can see. But I'm really excited to be bringing you guys more great stuff here on Danny on Everything, and stay tuned for this episode. What we got coming up, I think you're gonna like it very much. And once again, on behalf of Carl Cerny and everybody at Moose and myself, you are watching, experiencing Danny on Everything. Yeah.
Test is here. Also, it's easier. Yeah, I didn't know. But I saw your face. I gotta get out this.
So,
To protect the. I see it every year. All the time.
Eddie P. Comic-Con, Danny on Everything. What's up, y'all? Yeah, this has been great. It's been a lot of great, excellent tables. Everybody's so talented. Everybody's so nice. We doing this thing for Ed Piscor, man. It's so cool. Showing love for Eddie, and just much love to his family for this incredible work that they have done. And nothing but good things to say about this. Incredible event. And yeah, just super happy to have been a part of it. And I hope you guys can check out some of Ed Piscor's amazing artwork. And it's just a really amazing thing. And I'm really happy to be in Pittsburgh today at the Eddie P. Comic-Con. So let's go on in and see what we can see here. All right.
Something that can elevate my game with. So it was awesome. It just overwhelming.
All right, man.
How's it going, man?
Yeah, good. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Awesome.
Danny,
Nice to meet you. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Good to see you, bro. Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Up to your Substack. Maybe you could be educated about going up to stage.
And I am really, really happy to have as our first guest on the show Professor Michael Bakan. Michael is professor of ethnomusicology and head of the World Music Ensembles program at FSU, Florida State University. He's also the director of the university's Balinese Gamelan Ensemble. He graduated with a PhD from in ethnomusicology, right, from the University of California, Los Angeles, and has performed with such greats as John Cage, Tito Puente, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, as well as many, many others. Has spoken as a guest lecturer at Harvard and Yale, Columbia, Berkeley, the State University of Rio de Janeiro, and the University of Music in Graz, Austria, as well. Michael, we're so glad to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here.
So to start at the very beginning, tell us a little bit about where you came from originally and what your roots are.
All right. So I was born in East Lansing, Michigan. My parents both taught at Michigan State University, so I came out of a kind of an academic environment and became involved in music at about 3 years old when I got my first Beatles record, Beatles 6 with 8 days a week and all that kind of stuff. And I used to just, bang around on pots and pans in the kitchen and so on and so forth. And then one day my parents were at the Junior League thrift shop and they saw this box of junk in it, and my mom thought it was pots and pans, and my dad said, no, that's a drum. And so they bought the drum, and they brought it home, and there was a kid down the street who was a guitar player, so they figured he'd know how to put together a drum. And so he put it together. It turns out, just by coincidence, that guy is a guy named Marty Rokic, who's now also a music professor, a composer out in California. Anyway, so he put together the drum, and then I had a little plastic guitar and a Sgt. Pepper suit, and I'd just go down in the basement and spend my days, banging away on the drum, playing on the guitar, and thinking I was the fifth Beatle. So that was really the beginning. And then when I was about 6, my sister had taken up the violin, and then she had given it up quickly, and there was this little half-size violin in the hallway, and I felt sorry for the violin. So I thought it needed a friend, so I started playing the violin. So I did violin and drums for a long time. Then when I was 9, started playing my brother's rock band. When I was 11, got into playing jazz, taking lessons, getting a little more serious, and then my mind was blown when I was 11, and my drum teacher told me, oh, there's this concert, jazz concert, you might find it interesting. Turned out it was a double bill of Weather Report and Billy Cobham.
Oh, very nice.
And so that was my total sort of conversion experience. And once I heard Billy Cobham, I'm like, okay, that's the goal right there.
Right.
And kind of interesting coincidentally that it was Billy Cobham who sort of explored so many interesting things with Indian rhythmic systems and world music kinds of ideas through Mahavishnu Orchestra and things like
Right.
that. And then eventually, much later, well, not that much later, when I was 15 is when I started getting into some of the West African music and gamelan and things like that. And then eventually went through, got my degree in percussion performance at the University of Toronto. But my teacher there, Russell Hartenberger, was also an ethnomusicologist, great percussionist with Nexus and the Steve Reich Ensemble, but he had also studied South Indian music and done a dissertation on that, did a lot of West African music. And so I got into all that kind of stuff. And then sort of the sad part of the story is when I was in my early 20s, I lost the use of my arms, had a very bad chronic pain condition, and kind of had to give up playing for a while. And that's when I kind of shifted gears and ended up going to graduate school in ethnomusicology, and as it turned out, that worked out pretty well for me.
I'm sure many people are very thankful for that turn of bad luck.
Yeah.
So what brought you to Florida State specifically? Was there something about that university that directed you there?
Yeah, a job.
Yeah, right. Nice.
I didn't know a whole lot about Florida State. I was when I finished my PhD at UCLA, I was lucky enough to moved straight into a teaching position at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. But that was a 1-year position. It was sort of temporary thing. Somebody had left at the last minute, and I walked into that. They needed somebody who could teach ethnomusicology and direct a Balinese gamelan, so I seized that opportunity. But then, it wasn't clear whether that was going to turn into a permanent position. So meanwhile, I was out, applying for everything in the world. So I applied for positions at, I applied and actually got interviews at Harvard, at Pomona College out in California, at Wayne State in Detroit. And then eventually the Bowling Green job did go tenure track, and I did get offered the position. But by that time, I had already, gone on the rails for the Florida State job. And once I came down here and checked out what was happening, they had the great ethnomusicologist Dale Olson was here, and he was very cool and very, very friendly. And I thought this would be a great place to be. And I also wanted to live where it was warm.
Right.
But the great thing for me was that so I was kind of kept on the hooks with Harvard. Their search kept sort of dragging on, and they were sort of like, well, yeah, you're still under consideration. And finally, after being kind of put on hold for a long time, they offered me the job the day of my interview at Florida State. So I had the great pleasure of being able to call the folks at Harvard and saying, no thanks. So that's how I came here.
Very nice.
Yeah. And also I had heard, that Florida State was known for two things that I knew about. One, they had a very good football team. Then they had one of kick-ass College of Music. And so that was very attractive.
For sure. Yeah. Now, I was as I tour for a living, as you know, I was in Bali. We're talking about the Balinese Gamelan ensemble.
Yeah.
And upon already knowing your lengthy resume in the past, I already knew that you had already published a great book on the history of Balinese music, about the traditions of Balinese
Gamelan
music.
Gamelan
music. And it's called the so I get it right.
Yeah.
Music of Death and New Creation: Experiences in the World of Balinese Gamelan, Balaganjor.
Actually, that was pretty good.
Hey, which was put out by University of Chicago Press in 1999. That's your first.
That was my first book.
Publication, the first book. Now, I went to Bali for my first time just a couple months ago, and just like I thought, whenever I mentioned your name, people in the music industry knew exactly who you were and who I was talking about. So, yes, of course we know Michael Bakan.
Yeah.
Michael Bakan's a big deal, and da-da-da-da. And I was really proud to know you, and I had played them of the rendition that we had done of George Clinton's Atomic Dog with the Balinese Gamelan Ensemble, which was a great connecting point since I was there with George playing in Bali, and they were so proud and happy to know that there was some connection with this American artist.
Yeah.
I want you to tell us about your connection to Balinese culture and what really initially attracted. I know that you said you got into FSU. They had the Balinese Gamelan program already when you first went
Actually,
there?
no. What happened? So at Bowling Green, they had a Gamelan there because there had been a woman who taught there. It's a funny story, actually. So then I got the interview at Florida State. I come here and they offered me the job the day of the interview, which I wasn't expecting because all the other interviews, it's like, the last thing you do is you meet with the dean and they give you this whole spiel about, here's our tenure and promotion thing and here's the real estate situation. And you're like, who cares? I don't know if I have the job. So, this is like my 5th interview in 7 weeks. I've been all over the country. I'm dealing with all this stuff back, home. And so then the dean, who at the time was John Pearsall, he says, and we've been delighted with your visit here, Michael, and we know you have other offers on the table, and we'd like you to join us here on the faculty of Florida State. And I was like spacing out, thinking about, I'm going to go to the beach tomorrow, and then I'm like, suddenly catch my attention, like, oh, did you just offer me the job? And he's like, yeah, again, we know, we want you here, and you're our last candidate, and so we're not going to mess around. And so then I'm started like sort of trying to fill in the time as I'm trying to think, well, how do I respond to this? And I think, well, I'd have to blah, 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 just, when you're sort of talking one thing and something else is going on in your head. And I just kind of blurted out, well, I guess I'd have to give up my gamelan because they had the gamelan at Bowling Green. And he just sort of jumped in and said, well, if we bought you a gamelan, would that make the difference? Oh. And then I swear, I'm 98% certain this was the next sentence. So I said, well, I still have to think about it, but that would certainly make a difference. And then he leaned forward and said, and what's a gamelan? So and how much does it cost?
Right.
So anyway, that's how it happened. So actually, I was the one, FSU purchased the Gamelan and then sent me over there to commission the building of it, and that's a whole radio show in itself.
Right.
That was quite an experience. Yeah.
And it is quite an experience to both see and hear.
Yeah.
The music, the Gamelan music,
Yeah.
and it really is another world. I mean, as someone who plays quote unquote Western music, but grew up in an Armenian culture too. Balinese music is so far afield from anything that I have ever really heard, both in the instrumentation and in the music theory itself.
That's right.
Can you, without, I guess, like you said, a whole
without
book
writing another book about it.
Without writing another book about it.
Right.
Just for the listeners, what are some central themes of Gamelan? What are some central themes of maybe Balinese music that aren't so common or orthodox to the Western music that we know?
Sure, I can do that. So, I mean, the first thing you got to understand is that you're entering into a totally different sonic universe. Mm-hmm. Basically, 90% of the instruments are bronze percussion instruments.
Right.
So we have slab metallophones, kind of like a xylophone or a vibraphone, but with bronze keys. And then we have all these different kinds of gongs, from little tiny ones to great big ones that are like 90 inches across. And some of those gongs are set up on racks where they're played as melodic instruments, and others of them are punctuating instruments to mark out particular times within the cycles of the music. So we have this kind of shimmering quality of bronze that sort of permeates the whole space. Adding to that is the unique way in which these instruments are tuned. It's what we call paired tuning. So if we are tuning Western instruments, you bring in your piano tuner, right?
Sure.
He's got his A440, he's got his pitchfork, and everything's kind of set up with the exact intervals. Well, in Bali, it's a quite different system. You have a male and a female version of every instrument. And those two instruments, which are kind of thought of as one composite instrument, are tuned so that the pitch is a little bit apart. Now, when you get into the really low pitch ones, that would be like the equivalent of a semitone.
I was going to say it must be a semitones, yeah.
But when they're struck together, they create this, what's called ombak, a wave, an acoustical beating wave that goes whoa, 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 whoa. Now, the further up you go with these paired instruments into the high-pitched ones, that difference goes from being a semitone to being a tiny microtone. But the way it's tuned is not to the specific frequencies, but rather to the rate of oscillation of that acoustical beating, of that ombak. So the tiniest instruments and the large instruments all vibrate at the same rate. So you have whoa, 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 whoa.
Right.
And the key art of the tuning is to figure out how close do we have to make the intervals on the little instruments and how big do we have to make on the big instruments so that shimmering, that wave, that mechanical vibrato consumes the whole space. On top of that, as you go from octave to octave with the registers of the different instruments, the octaves are actually stretched. So if you're on a piano, you have an exact octave from C to C to C to C all the way up. Well, if you did that with the gamelan, this C would be a few cents higher than the C below it, and then that one a few cents. So that you get this stretching of the octave vertically and the stretching of the octave horizontally in the paired tuning. The idea behind all of that is that there's this sense, if you do yoga or meditation, Indian-based systems, Hindu-based systems. This is a Hindu culture in Bali.
Right.
Most
Bali
of Indonesia is Muslim.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the idea is that, like when you go Om, the universal sound, the sound of creation. Well, that every sound, you've heard the old cliche that the entire universe is contained in a grain of sand, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea that the entire universe is contained within everything that exists within it. So that within every pitch, within every sonic event, every time a note is played, when the gamelan goes, bam, right, that is the whole universe right there. So by stretching out the octaves vertically and horizontally, we get that idea of an entire universe in every sonic event. Similarly, when the music is actually played, and especially more in the Javanese than in the Balinese style of gamelan,
interesting,
the articulation is intentionally out of time.
Oh.
So that when, the different instruments are struck, quote unquote, on the beat, the gong will come, the big gong will come a little bit later than the small,
kind
metal
of
xylophone.
contrapuntal, if you will.
It's more like, not so much contrapuntal, but it's like, so you have counterpoint, you have different melodies going on at the same time, but this is more like just a note. So like if we all had like if an orchestra goes bomb, if the ball, you know, the Javanese especially would go bomb.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so it just sounds like, oh, these guys can't play together. You know,
Right,
they're not
right.
very good ensemble. But
That's
actually,
intended. That's
it's
the
intended,
yeah.
again, to stretch out the time so that every event is getting that whole sort of that cosmos within itself.
Right.
So those are a couple of things. And then,
Yeah.
then the other thing that happens, you get these interlocking parts. So that in Balinese gamelan, all the melody parts, pretty much, at least once you get into the embellishment to the melody, rather than having one person play a melodic part, is like two people are playing it, you know, Hocketing style.
Sure.
These guys got half the notes, this guy's got the other half notes. It's sort of the opposite of the Western concept. We're always trying to get like the drum set player, you know, he's going to do he's going to do the cymbal and the hi-hat and the bass drum and snare drum. You know, get one person to do what four used to do down in New Orleans Parade.
Right.
In Bali, it's the opposite. We can get three people to do what one person could do. That's better. Why? Because it creates tightness of the community.
Right. Interesting. It's very, very fascinating, and there are some parallels to other types of world music, and then some that have no parallel to me. At least in sonically, for me hearing it when I was in Bali, it really just took my breath away, and I can see how you could write several books on this. Speaking of which. Something that really blew me away, your textbook, World Music Traditions and Transformations, which was published by McGraw-Hill. It's been adopted in more than 150 universities and colleges, nationwide and internationally.
Well, actually, it's up to 250 now.
Oh, whoa, incredible! That is just, you should be so proud. I mean, obviously deserved, but should be so proud. And there's, if I'm not mistaken, a third edition is coming out soon.
Yeah, the third edition will be out October 1st, according to all the records. And I'm very excited about third edition because in the first couple of editions, we've been kind of beholden to 20th century technology. There's been a CD set that accompanies the book.
Sure.
And so you have to license everything, and you can only have so much time on 4 CDs or whatever it is. Well, now in the third edition, McGraw-Hill has a contract with Spotify.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
I can use anything on Spotify. No more excerpts, no more choosing between this and that. So basically the music playlist has gone from 107 tracks on the second edition to 320 tracks on the third edition.
Amazing.
So basically every time now that you come to a name, James Brown, Taylor Swift, whatever, you just go boom and you click and there you've got it.
Wow.
And so that's been a kind of a revolutionary, liberatory experience for me as the author of a book, because I always wanted to be able to include all the music, but you couldn't get things like you couldn't use Beyonce because they couldn't afford the licensing or they couldn't get the license. And now it's if it's on Spotify. And the amazing thing was that all the stuff I had, like 95% of it was already on Spotify,
as well as a good amount of world music. Because
including all the world music stuff. Right,
international. It doesn't matter what country.
Everything's there.
Very, very few countries have a ban on something like Spotify.
That's right.
There are some, but even in Bali, going back to Bali really quickly, I was listening to Balinese pop bands.
Oh yeah.
When I was there on Spotify. Interviews with them and things like that.
Yep.
I also want to talk to you about the Artism project and both its connection to the center in Florida, as well as the book that you have coming. You have another book coming out that deals specifically with this.
Well, okay, there's no simple answers when you ask me questions.
Nice. That's okay. That's good.
I'll give you a quick sort of backstory to the new book, which sort of encompasses the Artism ensemble. Okay, so going back to 2003, here I was, sort of a mid-career ethnomusicologist, recently tenured, teaching in Florida State, had a couple of books out, another textbook, first edition on its way, whatever. It's on that sort of. So, and then there was a sort of a total radical shift in my life when a kid came into my family network who was diagnosed at about the age of 3 as being on the autism spectrum with Asperger's syndrome, and so there's a close relationship I had with this kid, and but I didn't really know how to kind of get in, because and I didn't know what was going on because this was all new to me. And then I had my then colleague Ben Cohen, who used to teach at Florida State. He's now in China teaching at a university there. But he was over at the house for the first time. We were just jamming, playing some drums after dinner, and this kid who would always kind of disappear whenever company came over or whatever, he emerged out of his bedroom and came while we were playing and just joined in with us.
Wow.
And it was just kind of this magical, amazing experience, and suddenly there was this kind of connection. And afterwards, this kid who would always kind of, like wouldn't speak English even though he could, and would kind of always carry a lot of tension in his body. Suddenly he was like relaxed, and he was talking lucidly, and he was using his, hands to gesture while he was speaking, just like a total change. And it was just like, this is what I got to do.
It was very obvious that the music had sparked something.
Music had done something, right? And so I just, somehow I have to create, what am I? I'm a musician. I'm an ethnomusicologist. Right. Somehow I have to make this what I, rather than going back to Bali or whatever else, I got to do this. Mm-hmm. And so I essentially found a way to create the ethnomusicology of autism. And that kind of, it was very strange initially for the field, but because I was already somewhat known, people were like, okay, we'll publish his stuff.
And specificity is very important in academia.
Right.
A true academician is very specific.
You gotta know.
You gotta find the
and
niche.
I had passion for it. So went there, and so first there was this project called the Music Play Project, which was kind of more therapeutic. Then a few years later there was the Artism project, where essentially it was almost like these video games like Guitar Hero or something, where you had these kids on the autism spectrum. They would come in. We'd have this what we call the EWAMP, the Exploratory World Music Playground. We have all kinds of cool instruments all over the place, and they could just do whatever they want. But on top of that, we had a band of great musicians from all over the world, some of whom Dan, Carlos Odria, Carlos Silva, people like that.
Yeah, and fantastic.
And so they were kind of there at the whim of these kids to sort of say, okay, you do this, you do that. And so we got this grant from the National Endowment of the Arts, and we put together this ensemble, and we went out and did, big concerts, and, did, web broadcasts and all kinds of things. So that was arts with kids. And out of that, a whole bunch of interesting things happened. You can read about it if you want in the book when it comes out.
Nice.
But that kind of segued into this project where I was interviewing autistic musicians from all over the world, from Israel, from Canada, from all over the United States, and mainly interviewing them online, text messaging interviews, and about their experiences as musicians living in the world as autistic people.
Amazing.
And those conversations become the basis of the new book, which is called Speaking for Ourselves: Conversations on Life, Music, and Autism. And I'm very fortunate and happy that the book has been accepted for publication by Oxford University Press.
Very nice.
And so it'll be out on June 1st. I'm very excited about that.
That's fantastic. On June 1st. And speaking of books, this is your fourth book, right?
Well, it depends how you count. I mean,
based on
the main books. So there's Music of Death and New Creation. There's the World Music Textbook, and then there's this book. But because the World Music Textbook has been published in multiple
so many editions, sure.
So we'll call it 5.
Okay, fantastic. And then so that's coming out in 2018.
Both the third edition of World Music and the autism book are coming out. Let me just qualify one thing before we go on, because some people, if they're in the world of therapy and so on, speech therapy, working with autistic people, might think, well, why is he saying autistic people? Why isn't he saying people with autism? Because there's sort of debate about the correct terminology.
Really? Okay.
So there's what's called person-first language, where you say a person with autism, and that has become considered more respectful. However, people who are autistic, at least the people that I'm working with, they say, no, we don't like that. We are autistic people, because if you say people with autism, it implies there's something bad about
right, that it's
autism.
A condition.
Yeah. It's like you don't say you're a person with Armenianness.
Right, exactly. Right.
So just to qualify that.
It's very interesting. Yeah. And also I wanted to touch on something that you have done for several years, I believe, at FSU, the Rainbow Concert.
Yeah.
And this is going into, 2018 will be the what?
21st, I believe.
Wow, I was going to say like 15th.
Maybe even the 22nd. I'm losing track.
And you were involved in all of every single one of them?
Yeah, well, I was there. Dale Olson, who I talked about earlier,
right.
He was my senior colleague up until 2008 when he retired. And he still lives here in town. He's very much part of the community. Hey, Dale, if you're listening. He came up with, they have this big thing, the Prism Concert. It's a big institution at FSU where it's like they bring out, the marching chiefs, the big 400-piece marching band. They got all the orchestras and the choirs. And so Dale came up with this idea, well, why don't we do like a Prism Concert, but we'll do it world music with all of our world music ensembles, because we have like the largest world music performance program in the country, arguably.
I didn't know that.
Certainly in the southeastern United States. Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic.
Like 10, 11 ensembles going on all the time. And so I was kind of, my first thought was, oh man, that sounds like a logistical nightmare. It's just a lot of work. But I was like, okay, let's do it. So we did it, and then this tradition started of bringing in a guest artist every year. So this coming year, the 2018 concert, which will be on Friday, March the 2nd at Ruby Diamond Concert Hall, will feature a wonderful artist who also, Hai Cheong.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Hai Cheong, who's
genius. She is absolute genius. I love playing with her. She's
Yes.
an amazing musician.
So she's like, one of the world's greatest Chinese zheng players.
Right.
Chinese is like the harp zither.
Yes.
And she actually won in 1995. She won the national zheng competition of China. That's that's like winning the Leventrit piano competition.
Sure. Yeah,
So
exactly.
She
Yeah,
truly
yeah.
is world class. And she's now in her 3rd year of her PhD. I'm her dissertation advisor. And she's off to China next year to do her field research for her dissertation. So this is going to be a big send-off for her.
Gotcha.
But we've been fortunate to have some really amazing guest artists, including yourself.
It was an honor. Myself and my boss, Mr. George Clinton.
Yes, indeed.
We got to do a P-Funk themed rainbow concert where several of the ensembles played a different song from the vast discography of P-Funk's music, and it was an absolute pleasure. I had so much fun going in and rehearsing with the groups, meeting all the kids, the students, the adults, the professors, all the staff, all the people. Everyone was just so wonderful, and I know George really loved it too. And you also, I wanted to talk also about one of the ensembles that I've both seen before and after the Rainbow concert several times and worked with, Omni Musica, which is your baby basically, and. I know that I think you guys, are you on hiatus this semester? Or?
No, we're still active.
Okay.
But we will be. I was on what's called research-oriented semester in the fall, so I was not teaching any of my regular classes, but I did do Omni Musica just for kicks and giggles,
So tell everybody what Omni Music exactly
Okay.
is and what you guys do.
So, as per the theme of the conversation here, there's a bit of a backstory to it, how it happened in the first place. So, going back to Artism, the Artism Ensemble, so around 2010, I kind of had these 2 ideas in my head. One of them was I wanted to, figure out some kind of a new kind of an ensemble configuration to work with the autistic kids that we had been working with the Music Play Project, but in a more kind of performance environment, to do concerts as opposed to just doing this kind of music play lab therapy kind of thing. And by the way, I'm not a music therapist, just that's another point to make clear. And the other was to put together this kind of all-star ensemble, because we had all these incredible musicians here at Florida State, who had come to study ethnomusicology or who were here for other reasons. Mia Gormandy, one of the world's great steel pan players, who just a couple days ago, as per the day that we're doing this interview, graduated with her PhD.
Oh, nice.
And she's now professor of steel pan at the University of Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh, wow.
So she was in town, which is great. So anyway, we had all these great musicians, and so I thought, well, maybe we can put these things all together. So I put together this super group with those, with Carlos Adria, Carlos Silva, Mia Gormandy, Vivian Asturzag, all these great players.
Yeah.
And we started working with the kids. And then around that same time, the coordinator of musicology at the time, Douglas Seaton, my good friend and colleague, said, okay, you've just been promoted to full professor and you've done a lot of good things around here. So next semester, I'm just going to give you, rather than assigning you teach this or teach that, what do you want to teach?
Oh.
What do you want to teach? And so I said, I want to teach, I'd like to teach like a practicum in cross-cultural improvisation and just bring together all these really good musicians we have around here from different cultures and see what we can cook up.
Incredible.
Yeah. And
fusion.
A fusion thing. So we didn't really have any set design on it. We brought all the people together and we just started, and it turned from a cross-cultural improvisation thing more into a thing where myself and other members of the group were composing music,
right,
drawing from all these different traditions,
right,
and it sort of started to gel around this idea. Around that time, I was very interested in the Hebrew liturgy, Jewish prayers, traditional Jewish prayers, and so I started doing all of these settings of these traditional Jewish prayers, but in this world music fusion kind of crazy kind of vibe, and that became the basis of a semester's or year-long project, which then became the basis of an album. which was put out and which actually ended up making it to the first ballot entry stage of the Grammys for Best World Music Album.
Ashrei?
Ashrei is the name of the album.
That's the album, right? Yeah, it's a fantastic album. And I was very happy to help.
That's right.
Mr.
You were
David
involved
Cobb with some of the some translating on an Armenian piece.
That's right. That's right. Which is that was I think how we first met.
I think it is too. Yep. And since then, Michael and I have got to play in several ensembles, including Omni Musica, and also my Armenian trio and my Armenian dectet for the centennial of the Armenian genocide in 2015, and many other things. And it's interesting how the Omni Musica and ethnomusicology in general, but with Omni Musica almost specifically, it brings you back to that concert you spoke about, the fusion, the idea of a fusion of sounds from around the world. Because even Weather Report, where it's a jazz fusion group, they had at one time one of their drummers, Acuna. He was from where is he from? He's from
Peru.
Peru, right? Yeah. And so they were really incorporating this world thing into. Absolutely. They had a percussionist who was also from Latin America somewhere, and even Billy Cobham is from.
Well, he's American, but he's like. Because of working with John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu, he was one of the first great jazz drummers to really be incorporating all of these different
Brazilian things,
African things,
definitely
Indian things,
So it all kind of comes full circle.
It does.
And I want to ask you also because I know personally your background, Jewish from Galicia, which was at one point in Poland, one point the Austrian Empire, one point Ukraine.
Depends what week it was.
What week it was is in a different. So from the Jewish diaspora in Galicia, and how does that relate to how you feel about ethnomusicology as a whole?
Yeah.
And secondly, how far do you think ethnomusicology has gone from a point like, say, maybe even 20 years ago when you first started doing things with FSU?
Wow, well, those are two big questions. The Jewish question is an interesting one, maybe one I haven't thought about explicitly so much. But if you look at the field of ethnomusicology, of course, if you look at a lot of academic disciplines, there's a disproportionate representation of Jewish people who do this,
interesting.
Where the kind of the wandering Jew phenomenon,
right?
We're going all over the world, and for a long time, I think a lot of those people were, they were studying Balinese music, or they were studying West African music, or they were studying whatever. Then in more recent years, there was more of a sense of some of these Jewish scholars coming back to saying, well, what about me? What about my ethnicity? What about my tradition? What about my being Jewish? And so you have people like Mark Slobin and Kay Chalamet and Judah Cohen, other, lots, Joel Rubin, more than I can mention, who deserve to be mentioned in this. Mark Kligman, who are ethnomusicologists who are studying Jewish music from an ethnomusicological perspective.
Right.
And I guess in my case, I've done some of that. I wrote one of the chapters in the first edition of my world music book was on music and Jewish mysticism, and that was something I was, Kabbalah, and I was very interested in that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's actually been more, the Jewish connection has been more in my musical life. So there's the Ashrei project of the setting of those prayers, and then there's this whole other thing which you and I have kind of played with in different ways, which is my kind of numerological, mathematical, permutational, combinational side of things, and that actually ties in some interesting ways, probably beyond what we have time to talk about today, into sort of Kabbalistic gematria of the numerological systems. And I've written some, actually one major gamelan piece called Gending Berwang, which means Song of the Bear. There's a weird story behind that, where there was like a Winnie the Pooh bear, and you push its stomach and it sings a song, and that's the theme.
Okay.
But anyway, it was all based on all of this kind of Kabbalistic numerology. And I actually ended up giving a talk at the University of Chicago, which was a really whacked talk, in which I got up. They had invited me. It was after my first book on Gamelan came out. I think they thought I was going to talk, about something like that. And then I got up and talked about that piece, Gending Berwang. But I actually interviewed myself as I was like the ethnomusicologist interviewing the composer of the piece. So it was kind of this, this very bizarre thing.
Wow.
And talking about the process and the kind of the numerological foundations of this piece and the mathematics of it. And the people in the audience, like, some people really dug it, and then like some of the people like, what the heck is this guy coming up to the University of Chicago? But the coolest thing was there was this very, very eminent music theorist, Professor Cohn, and he had just showed up, And then afterwards, I'm saying any questions, and so people ask me, and this guy's sitting in the back and raises his hands. I didn't know who he was. I would have known if I had known his name, but I didn't. He was just sitting there, and he starts saying to me, so when you were talking about the permutational combinations of the cycle of 27 and the cycle of 40 and how they, add up to 1080, but if you develop, and like he was going way beyond, because he's like his whole thing is like mathematical music theory, and for me that was like this unbelievable moment. Like I just felt like the angels were entering my soul or something, where this guy had gotten the piece in a way like nobody else ever could.
It's fantastic.
And so yeah, there's definitely that sort of Jewish imprint through Kabbalistic thinking, but maybe going back generation, things that are sort of in my DNA,
imprinted in you. Yeah.
Now, as far as
that's the best stuff, anyway.
It sometimes, indeed.
Yeah.
As far as how ethnomusicology has changed, it's changed tremendously, and I've been really happy that it has, because when I first came into the field, I was actually very bitter to be there, because I mentioned earlier I had this chronic pain syndrome, which caused me to stop being able to play.
Right.
And that's when I went to graduate school, but I kind of came in the back door. This wasn't my choice of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a player, I wanted to be a composer, I wanted to be a musician. And here I would, sort of as a second option, I was being an ethnomusicologist. Now that changed over time. Now I couldn't be happier with what I do, but at the time I was this angry graduate student, very bitter. And what made me really mad was that at that time it was all kind of this structural anthropology approach, and everything was very kind of sciencing about music, to quote Alan Merriam, who was a very famous ethnomusicologist of the 1960s. And to me what it felt like was like the way that they were thinking and talking and treating music was like if someone you loved had just died, and they put up an anatomically correct portrait of that person on the wall, and then had a pointer and said, so this was Pat, and this was Pat's arm, and this was Pat's hand, and this was how she used her hand to. But that doesn't tell you anything about. And I felt that the way that they were talking about music and musicians was kind of like that, and I became kind of ornery about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, over time, the field shifted, and what I figured out early on, kind of intuitively, was that there's not enough attention to actual musicians, what they have to say, what they care about, what they feel in the music. And the other thing is, the reason that those people aren't in there is because the scholars themselves are taking themselves out of the story. They're trying to be these objective scientists.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the person who's doing the interviewing, the research, whatever, then you can't have the person on the other side. How would this conversation go if you weren't asking me these questions? It wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
So I sort of figured out it has to be about dialogue. It has to be about dialogue in music making and dialogue in conversation. And until we put that back in, it's not weird. Now, there were some people who were sort of saying that before I came along, but when I came along is right about the time it started to really kick in. And just by good chance, the guy who became my major professor, my dissertation advisor, Tim Rice, eminent ethnomusicologist at UCLA, just retired, he kind of came from that more science side to where I was at, and I came from this kind of whacked out musician side, and we kind of met in the middle. And interestingly, our two first books are often kind of taught together because they kind of both deal with this idea. So what it came to involve is this idea of reflexivity, the scholar sort of engaging his or her own experience within whatever happened in Bali, in Bulgaria, in his case, wherever it was. And as good fortune would have it for me, that was all considered, I was considered like way out in left field doing all this stuff, and my fellow students at UCLA are like, what the heck, you can't do that. But right at the very year that my dissertation came out, this giant 609-page tome on, a reflexive ethnomusicology of Balinese, Gamelan, this guy Tim Rice and some other sort of heavy hitters of the the prior generation did this big panel at the big ethnomusicology meeting on reflexivity, and so suddenly that was what everybody was talking about. And here I came onto the job market on the cutting edge of it, and so I went from sort of this outlier, outcast guy who everybody figured, he's kind of smart, but he's kind of crazy, and he's never going to get a job, to being able to entertain lots of job offers. So the moral of that story is stick to your convictions, do what you think is right, and eventually, hopefully, you'll get a job.
That is fantastic. Now, Michael, I know you have a bunch of shows coming
Yeah.
up in January.
Yeah.
Can you tell us maybe just what the next 3 or 4 are that you have coming up?
Sure. I can kind of, hopefully I can remember everything. So January 6th, I will be at the Blue Tavern with the Bakan Market Hall World Trio, which is an amazing group. The young pianist Mason Margott, he's currently a senior year at jazz studies major at Florida State, studying with Marcus Roberts and Bill Peters.
Nice.
And those guys.
Very cool.
And he's really, he's on his way.
Yeah.
He's going to be going to New York next year, and we'll be able to say, we knew him when.
Nice.
And then the great bassist in town, Brian Hall, who he's kind of like my brother here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be playing there on the 6th, and then on the 12th I'll be back at Blue Tavern with Brian again, and with great jazz guitarist Richie Suma. And then on the 18th, it's like every 6 days, it's almost like a publicist. I'll be actually there again with Colleen Nixon, who's this wonderful, wonderful singer. And then on the 19th, I'll be down at Rio Carabel. They have a nice jazz series down in Carabel, down on the coast there.
Nice, yeah.
With the Bakan Market Hall Trio. And then on the 20th, before the Tallahassee Symphony concert from 6:30 to about 7:45, we'll be playing in the lobby as the sort of the pre-show before the symphony concert with Bakan Market Hall. So
Nice.
A few things coming up.
I highly urge everybody to come out and see all, if you can, of these performances. At least 1 or 2 with Professor Michael Bakan. Professor Michael, it has been endlessly fascinating as always. I could talk to you for hours about all of this stuff and many other things. Congratulations on your continued success, and we hope we can have you come back and talk to us some more soon in the future.
Absolutely, I'll come back anytime. And if this is your first time being the interviewer as opposed to interviewee, you're a natural.
Hey!
You did an awesome job.
Nice.
It's been a pleasure. It's been really fun.
Professor Michael Bakan, and we'll be right back. Thank you very much.
City, 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 Reiter spiti, Reiter passio. Arăjinzet corački, I tuto vor revi hambore ciru. Arăjinzet corački, I tuto vor revi hambore ciru. I tuto arăjinzet corački, I tuto vor revi hambore ciru.
yeah, y'all. Danny on everything. Last day in Tokyo. Look at this beautiful view of the biggest city in the world. Man, I'm gonna miss you, Tokyo. It was a great time. Great trip. Had an excellent time. And we're looking forward to coming back in 2025. Much love to everybody who helps with Danny on everything, most notably Mr. Carl Cerny for all your good work. And I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We are going to be coming back to you next month with a brand new episode, so check it out. Check out my Patreon, Danny Bedrosian. It's patreon.com/Danny Bedrosian. Check out my social media. Check out my new book, The Authorized P-Funk Song Reference, Official Canon of Parliament Funkadelic. Check out my comic book, Sons of the Sun. And my new music. We got some new albums coming out the end of this year and beginning of next year, so check that out. So on behalf of Carl Cerny and everybody at Moose Magnificat, everybody involved, you have been watching, listening to, experiencing Danny on everything.